Greetings and welcome back to room 303 and our talks with Walt, as we are calling our reading now through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now to the section called Children of Adam, poem number 3, I Sing the Body Electric. Now here, this is going to be just a set of introductory comments about this poem of some 9 sections, and we'll get into kind of a little bit about how this poem was first published in 1855 along with the original Song of Myself, and then went through several different editions, and we'll be talking about that in more detail. We'll be giving individual set of comments and lectures over every one of the 9 sections. Now first, to some quick assumptions. My assumption as I'm giving this intro lecture, and then of course the series of talks to follow of the 9 sections of I Sing the Body Electric, my assumption is that you've been with us right from the start through LearnStrong.net. Down the left-hand side, Talks with Walt is our playlist. I hope that you've been with us for the 24 poems of inscriptions, the 19 sections of Paumanok. In some ways, reading starting from Paumanok is a way to get ready to, in fact, read Sing the Body Electric. Of course, the 52 sections of Song of Myself are, without question, crucial, as well as the previous 2 poems of Children of Adam, along with the introductory set of comments that I've already given. Now, just to remind, every one of the poems from Children of Adam, as well as from Columnists, which are very, very controversial poems in their own day, and they remain somewhat controversial today, although probably less so. I like to start, though, with that line from Song of Myself, passage 27. I merely stir, he writes, press, feel with my fingers, and am happy. And then, of course, that famous line that we talked so much about in earlier lectures, to touch my person to someone else's is about as much as I can stand. Now, let's go ahead and introduce ourselves quickly to the 9 sections of I Sing the Body Electric. I'm going to start with our Nortons really quickly in this note. It's number 5 of the 12 poems of the 1855 edition. I Sing the Body Electric, untitled and unsectioned, became Poem of the Body in the 1856 edition, augmented with the remarkable anatomical inventory, which now concludes the poem in passage 9. We're going to have more to say about that. Some scholars have said they really don't like this 9th section. We'll get into, why or why not. The poet's manuscript notes thereon are now in the Trent Duke collection. In 1860, the poem became, of course, Children of Adam, number 3, with a few minor revisions, and then in 1867 it acquired its present sectioning and title, which was also its opening line. There were minor changes in 1871, 1881. What the poet sang, lovingly, boldly, to the limit of specificity, was the world's body, in whose movements he found insatiable delight, but also, as he tells us repeatedly, he is singing the soul, end quote. Now, as we step into our study of I Sing the Body Electric, there's a few ideas that I just want to share with you, and I'll let you write these down. Now, we are going to end this brief intro with pointing out the ways in which the opening lines of the 55 edition are quite different from, of course, the final edition of the deathbed edition of Leaves of Grass, and that's what we'll be paying attention to. But, much as I did in our study of Song of Myself, if I see that there are some additions, some lines, some deletions, I might point those out for you as you're going through your study here. Again, as we said, published in 1855 originally, it appears, of course, without its title. The poem's first line was later changed. The first line of the poem, the bodies of men and women engirth me, and I engirth them. This word engirth is an interesting word. Obviously, this is going to be a poem about the human body. It's fascinating to me that when I talk with students of Leaves of Grass, and they've read all of Leaves of Grass, all the poems of Leaves of Grass, it's interesting the number of my students who have said that I Sing the Body Electric is easily one of their top 5 favorite poems of Leaves of Grass. Obviously, I'm hoping that you'll be able to make, kind of your own decision about this. It's interesting that of the original 55 edition, I Sing the Body Electric hasn't had the level of academic scrutiny that others of the poems have had. I think there's a number of reasons for this. Some reviewers of the poem have pointed out that the poem lacks originality and this kind of thing. I'm going to argue that I really believe that that's completely mistaken. I think this is an amazing poem, both the original 55 edition as well as the final edition, as we'll be looking at it. A lot of people don't like, especially the 9th section. They're made uncomfortable by it. We'll get to it. It is a poem, of course, because it's part of that 55 edition, when Whitman was just coming into his own poetic voice, and so we're going to study it from that perspective. And as well, of course, his love of the body. I mean, he says in section 8, if anything is sacred, the human body is sacred. And then he will say in section 1, if the body were not the soul, what is the soul? And you'll go back to our Song of Myself, passage 48. I have said that the soul is not more than the body, and I have said that the body is not more than the soul, and nothing, not God, is greater to one than oneself is. So reading this set of lines now, and I sing the body electric, we're going to already have been set up for this kind of thing. And of course, from passage 3, from passage 5 of Song of Myself, and other passages as well, we've already seen Whitman's real celebration of the body. Now, why is this such a big deal? Sometimes my students will be like, so he celebrates the body, big deal. Well, it takes us back to our Plato. You'll remember that when I did the poem Eidolons with you from Inscriptions, that we talked about Plato's Republic, and of course I've given full lectures on Republic, but one of the arguments that Plato makes, of course in his two-box theory, is that there are beautiful bodies, and that's in our first box, over-related to the senses. And what do we know about everything in the first box? Well, it all sags and bags, everything dies. There's beautiful bodies, and then there's this concept called beauty in the second box. That second box is, of course, for Plato, far more important than the first box. Borrowing heavily from Plato, St. Augustine will play the same game in his reading of the Genesis 3 account. As we've said in our studies of Augustine and LearnStrong.net, although the word sin and the word fall does not appear in the Genesis 3 story, Augustine will define it that way. So Adam and Eve eating of the forbidden fruit will introduce sin and a fallen state into the world. That's represented how in that story? Well, of course, when Adam and Eve eat from the forbidden fruit, which of course, the trajectory, as we've said in other lectures, is from St. Augustine to Dante to Milton. We've said a lot about Milton, of course, in our studies already of Children of Adam. Makes sense, right? In Paradise Lost, Milton is playing with the same game. Now, what is that argument? It's a simple argument. The body in Christian theology is understood from Augustine on as being kind of disgusting. Remember what we said about St. Augustine. He was a sex addict most of his young life until he has the conversion experience that he writes about in Confessions. We've given full lectures on this at LearnStrong.net. For Augustine, then, the human body is kind of disgusting and gross, right? That's, by the way, why we had to make that distinction in our last poem, Pent Up Aching Rivers, when he uses the word gross, that he doesn't mean gross as in yucky. He just means large as in powerful, okay? So the body is kind of gross, and in the body there is this thing called soul, and the soul is, of course, divine. And the soul is to be celebrated, not the body. Now that was the understanding as Whitman was writing and publishing in 1855 and on. So for him to celebrate the body in these poems, especially in I Sing the Body Electric, notice it's not I sing the soul electric, it's I sing the body electric. That's radical. But what's even more radical is that he will bring the two together, and he will in fact celebrate both body and soul. And it's hard at times to know whether he's talking about the physical body versus the metaphysical body. But then, wait, we'll do one more. And you know this already because you've been following our lectures. Whitman is going to talk about the individual body of the human being, right? And then as well the collective body of especially Americans. Although, as we have said, by the time Whitman is picked up and read, especially in the 20th century, increasingly because of poems like Passage to India, it's becoming less and less about America solely as the collective body and humans and the world in general, which is why I think Whitman is so loved all over the world for his poetry. Now, really quickly, we can go through the sections and just make some quick observations, starting in section 1, which is, again, the celebration of the body, to section 2. He's going to begin to talk about desire itself, and he'll talk about a swimmer naked in the swimming bath. This will take us back, of course, to Pent Up Aching Rivers, as well as to passage 11 of Song of Myself. He's going to be talking about all of the amazing bodies. And so we're going to have to prepare ourselves, because he's going to get pretty detailed here as he describes bodies. In section 3, he's going to talk about a farmer, and it's kind of an idealized farmer. And some scholars have pointed out that this may be the invention in 55 of already what Whitman was really headed towards as the ideal person. By section 4, we're going. He's going to say, "I do not ask any more delight. I swim in it as a sea," talking about bodies, especially male and female bodies. And by passage 5 and 6, he's going to be describing both male and female bodies in remarkable detail. He'll be talking about women bodies as well as male bodies, which makes him in 55. This kind of stuff is going to lead Emerson to say to him, in a really famous conversation that I think we already spoke about in an early intro lecture for Children of Adam and the Calvinist poems, actually, Emerson was thoroughly convinced that Whitman should edit all this sexual stuff out. He said, "This is going to hurt your readership." Whitman said, "I don't care. This matters to me. I'm going to stick with it." It's interesting how Whitman will see women both in erotic ways as women are attractive to men, but also as powerfully sexual in their own way. We're going to see this, and he'll talk about how he himself and his desires are ungovernable at times. And then there will be a kind of bringing together of the individual human body with collective human bodies in the body politic or democracy itself, as we'll talk about it. And then we'll begin to see this kind of democratic view in passage 7 and 8. Now, these are very controversial, and many have argued some of the most controversial passages in all of Leaves of Grass, because Whitman will speak of a black slave male and a black slave female on the auctioning block. But he will speak about them as human, which is, for the time, remarkable. Okay, now again, we've already spoken about Whitman and some of his racist tendencies. Here, we're going to see some of his anti-slavery tendencies, and he will be speaking. He even says it as he speaks about a slave, "Wherein there runs blood, the same old blood, the same red running blood," end quote. And this will make us think, obviously, of that exchange between Huck Finn and Jim in Twain's Huckleberry Finn, right? Now, we're going to finish then in section 8 with some questions. It's clear that Whitman is wondering about his own sexual desires, especially towards men. And of course, today we would just simply say, "Dude, you're gay. I mean, what's the problem? Enjoy your own sexual orientation." But not in 55. In 1855, that's a big deal. And so he goes through a process of trying to kind of understand his own attraction, and you'll get some sense of that as well as you read in passage 8. And it almost seems as if he's trying to legitimate some of the emotions and feelings that he is feeling. By passage 9, this is an add-on, and we'll talk about it when we get there. This is one of more of those great catalogs. Only this is going to be a remarkable catalog, because he's basically going to catalog the entire human body with all of the different body parts being articulated. And as we said, this did upset Emerson. And in fact, Emerson spent 2 hours in 1860 in the Boston Commons, as we've said already, talking. Whitman himself said it this way about Emerson, quote, "Emerson, he was the talker and I the listener. It was an argument, statement, reconnoitering, review, attack, pressing home of all that could be said against that part, and a main part, in the construction of my poems," the sexual rendering. "Each point of ease," that is to say, Emerson's statement, "was unanswerable. No judge's charge ever more complete or convincing. I could never hear the points better put." In other words, Emerson made the best argument you could make to not have these poems in Leaves of Grass. And then he says, "I felt down in my soul the clear and unmistakable conviction to disobey all and to pursue my own way," end quote. No set of lines in his journals better illustrate Whitman as iconoclast, Whitman as the poet who will say, I will do it my own way. And his own way will open, then, I Sing the Body Electric in 1855, with these sets of lines. We've already opened with the first ones. The bodies of men and women engirth me and I engirth them. They will not let me off, nor I them, till I go with them and respond to them and love them. Was it dreamed whether those who corrupted their own live bodies could conceal themselves, and whether those who defile the living were as bad as those who defile the dead? The expression of the body of man or woman bulks account. The male is perfect, that of the female is perfect. Now that's the 55 edition. By 67, he's writing it this way: I sing the body electric. Again, as we said, all of the poems in Children of Adam will have as their title the first line of the poem. I sing the body electric, the armies of those I love engirth me and I engirth them. They will not let me off till I go with them, respond to them, and discorrupt them, and charge them full with the charge of the soul. Was it doubted that those who corrupt their own bodies conceal themselves? And if those who defile the living are as bad as those who defile the dead? And if the body does not do fully as much as the soul, and if the body were not the soul, what is the soul? The first passage, again in the 1855, there was no breaking this up into sections. We're going to have 9 sections. I hope that you'll come back with me and we'll go to work with I Sing the Body Electric, passage number 1. Thank you.